Reporting child abuse is everyone's responsibility. People often talk about mandated reporters, or people who are required by law to report child abuse and neglect. In New Jersey, everybody is a mandated reporter. New Jersey reporting laws state that any person who has a reasonable cause to believe that a child has been subjected to abuse shall report the same to the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, New Jersey's Child Protective Service Agency. Any person knowingly violating the reporting laws, including the failure to report an act of child abuse, having reasonable cause to believe that an act of child abuse has been committed, is a disorderly person and subject to a fine of up to $1,000 or up to 6 months imprisonment, or both. Any person who in good faith makes a report of child abuse or neglect or testifies in a child abuse hearing resulting from such report is immune from any criminal or civil liability as a result of such action. In New Jersey, there are 2 agencies who investigate reports of child abuse. The first is the Division of Child Protection and Permanency, formerly known as DYFS, which is New Jersey's Child Protective Service Agency. The division responds to cases where a parent or another individual who is in a caretaker role to a child under the age of 18, including a guardian, teacher, or child care worker, abuses a child. Reports to the division are made through the statewide hotline, 1-877-NJ-ABUSE. In cases where a child is abused by a stranger or person in a non-familial or non-caretaker role, law enforcement will respond. In New Jersey, the county prosecutor's office and local law enforcement will be the agencies to investigate such reports. The Morris County Prosecutor's Office can be contacted at 973-285-6200. We typically recommend that when reporting suspected child abuse, a call is made to both the division and law enforcement. These agencies are skilled at making the determination as to who should investigate the report. Any person can make a report of child abuse. It's important that whenever possible, the person who witnessed the abuse or received the disclosure be the reporter. Third-party reporting often leads to missing or inaccurate information that can hinder the investigation. Learning that a child has been abused is something nobody ever wants to have to deal with. Understanding how to make a report can alleviate some of the anxiety associated with receiving a disclosure and help ensure that the child can receive the appropriate help. All reasonable suspicions should be reported, including a child telling you of abuse, witnessing the abuse, a parent's statement of abuse, physical and/or behavioral signs of abuse. This includes subsequent disclosures or witnessing of abuse, even if you've reported abuse in the past. All reports are investigated individually. Provide as much information as possible: the child's name, age, and a description, your relationship to the child, an address where the child can be located and/or the child's current location, a name and description of the abuser and their relationship to the child, a detailed description of the suspected abuse, any knowledge of past abuse or reports, names and contact information of others who may have witnessed the abuse or have knowledge of the abuse. When the media interviews people following a tragic incident of abuse, you often hear them talk about having seen signs, yet surprisingly, they never reported their suspicions. There are several reasons why people do not report child abuse. By becoming aware of the barriers to reporting abuse, we can work on skills to limit their effect on our response. One of the most common barriers to reporting is a lack of knowledge about child abuse and reporting laws. It's important to know and keep updated regarding reporting laws and professional reporting requirements, especially if you work in a profession that deals with children, such as a teacher or school administrator. Let's take a look at several other barriers to reporting. Believing that the situation can be taken care of within the family or another informal system. Studies show abusers do not stop their behavior without some kind of professional intervention. They'll offend again and with this child or another. In addition, child abuse is a crime which requires notification to the proper authorities. Children also need to be evaluated and receive necessary professional intervention. Many adults who present with mental health or other emotional or social disorders have a history of child abuse that was never addressed. Fear or unwillingness to get involved. Witnessing or receiving a disclosure of child abuse can be a frightening and uncomfortable experience. However, the experience is much more frightening and uncomfortable for the child. Always remember, the safety and possibly life of a child is at stake. It's as simple as that. Fear of making matters worse. The child will continue to suffer the abuse if you don't report it. That's for certain. Making a report can lead to intervention, stop the abuse, and save this child as well as others. Worry of angering or alienating the alleged abuser or others. Reporting laws protect citizens from legal or civil retaliation. And once again, always remember, the safety and possibly life of a child's at stake. Fear that you're mistaken. The majority of abuse disclosures are true. Children rarely fabricate child abuse. It's the job of the proper authorities to investigate and determine the validity of an allegation of abuse. Believing that someone else will report the abuse. Don't assume that someone else will report the abuse. If everyone makes that assumption, nothing will happen and the child will remain at risk. Lack of faith in the system. Children are removed from their home only when there is a serious concern for their safety and only when it's necessary to protect them from future harm. Children are removed only when they're in imminent danger or through the authorization of the family court. While you may think a child should be removed from their home, professionals may determine providing support services would better serve the family. The goal of DCP&P, which is the New Jersey's Child Protective Services, is to keep families together when possible, which is usually in the best interest of the child. In working toward the goal of permanency and protection, services may be put in place that avoids the need for removal. Don't assume the system's failed just because a child was not immediately removed from their home. You may not be apprised of the current status of a case. Again, don't assume that just because you've not received an update on the case that the system has failed.